The letters were never meant to be found. A Duke of Blackwell story.
Some secrets don't wait to be discovered. They wait for the right person to survive them. When I inherited a crumbling estate from a great aunt I never knew, I expected dust, silence, and paperwork. What I found instead was a locked box hidden beneath the floorboards, carved with my own name. Inside, letters written in 1871, signed by the Duke of Blackwell, addressed to a woman who wouldn't be born for another century. Addressed to me. The letters are beautiful. They are dangerous. And someone very much alive, will do anything to make sure I never read them. Like this story? Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. We read every comment.
The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and bad news. Vivienne sat across the desk with her coat still on, her hands folded in her lap, watching the man across from her shuffle through documents as if the answer to her confusion was buried somewhere between page 4 and page 7. He had called her that morning, a Tuesday which was already a strange day for anything significant to happen, and told her in the flattest voice she had ever heard that she had inherited property. From whom? She had asked. So your great-aunt, Margaret Holloway née Blackwell. She had never heard that name before in her life. Now, sitting in the stiff leather chair, she watched him slide a photograph across the desk. A house, stone walls, ivy-covered, 3 floors, tall windows that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades. The kind of house that appeared in period films right before something terrible happened. Hartwell Manor, he said, Wiltshire. Passed through the Blackwell family for several generations. Your great-aunt was the last direct heir. She passed 4 days ago. I didn't know she existed. She knew you existed. He adjusted his glasses. She left very specific instructions. The estate passes to you and only you. No auction, no donation, no division of assets. He paused just long enough to make it feel deliberate. And one additional instruction, written separately sealed, addressed to you personally. He placed an envelope on the desk. Her name was written on the front in a hand she didn't recognize. Elegant, slightly shaky with age. Vivienne Claire Holloway, not her full legal name. Her middle name was rarely used. She hadn't listed it on any public document in years. She picked up the envelope and held it without opening it. How did she know my middle name? Vivienne asked. The lawyer looked at her over his glasses. I couldn't say. She read the letter in her car, parked outside, engine off, rain beginning to tap against the windshield in an irregular rhythm that felt almost intentional. Dear Vivienne, I know this is strange. I know you don't know me. I made a choice many years ago to stay away, not because I didn't care, but because caring too much has a cost in this family, and I had already paid more than my share. There is something at Hartwell that belongs to you, not because I am leaving it to you, but because it always has been yours. You will know it when you find it. Do not let anyone else find it first. Do not trust the lawyer. Do not, under any circumstances, let Sebastian Blackwell inside that house. Margaret. Vivienne read it twice. Then she looked back at the building where the lawyer was probably still sitting at his desk. She started the car. Hartwell Manor was exactly as the photograph suggested, imposing, a little sad, beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they've survived longer than they were supposed to. She arrived just before dusk, when the light was still gold, but the shadows were already taking over, and she stood at the iron gate for a long moment before pushing it open. The key the lawyer had given her was old, heavy, the kind of key that belonged to a different century. It worked. The front door opened into a hallway that smelled like cedar and something floral, faint, almost ghostly, as if someone had kept flowers in the house long after they had stopped being fresh. The floors were dark wood, slightly warped in places. The walls were paneled, hung with portraits she didn't recognize, generations of people who shared faintly the structure of her own face. She stopped in front of one of them. A man, oil on canvas, probably mid-Victorian by the style, dark coat, white cravat, one hand resting on the back of a chair. His expression wasn't what she expected from a formal portrait. It wasn't proud or distant. He looked like someone who was waiting, like someone who had been waiting for a long time and had made peace with the weight of it. The nameplate at the bottom of the frame read, William Arthur Blackwell, 4th Duke of Blackwell, 1871. She looked at the portrait for a long time. There was something in his eyes, painted still 150 years removed from any living moment, that she couldn't name. She told herself it was the light, the way dusk played tricks through tall windows. She moved on. The floorboard gave way on her third pass through the study. Not broke, just shifted. A hollow sound under her heel, slightly different from the rest, the kind of difference you only notice if the house is quiet enough. She stopped, looked down, crouched. The board lifted with very little resistance, as if it had been designed to be found. Beneath it, a small cavity, barely large enough to hold what it held. A box. Dark wood, reinforced at the corners with tarnished brass. A small lock, already open. The mechanism rusted through as if someone had broken it long ago and never replaced it. And on the lid, carved into the wood in careful, deliberate letters, "For Vivienne." She sat back on her heels and just looked at it. The house was silent. The rain outside had softened. Somewhere in the walls something settled and creaked the way old houses do, breathing almost. She lifted the box and set it on the desk. Inside letters, 12 of them, bound in a dark ribbon that had once been red and was now the color of dried roses. Each one sealed with wax, a crest she didn't recognize. Each one addressed in the same elegant hand she had seen on the envelope from the lawyer. "For Vivienne." She picked up the first one, broke the seal carefully. The paper was thick, expensive, brittle at the fold. The ink had faded from black to deep brown, but remained perfectly legible. She read, "Vivienne. You do not know me. I accept that as a fact with no bitterness attached to it. Time is not cruel, it is simply indifferent, and the gap between us is not a punishment, but a circumstance. Still, I find that I cannot stop writing to you. I have been told by those who mean well that what I experience is a form of illness, a fixation born of isolation and too much time spent in my own mind. Perhaps they are right. But the mind does not invent with this kind of precision. It does not conjure a voice it has never heard and make it sound always exactly the same. Your name is Vivienne. You have a habit of pressing your thumb to your lower lip when you are thinking. You prefer windows to doors, exits that offer a view before commitment. You are braver than you believe yourself to be, and lonelier than you allow yourself to admit. I do not know when you will read this. I do not know what year it will be or what the world will look like outside the window you are sitting near. I only know that you will find this box because I asked Margaret to make sure of it, and Margaret has never failed me in anything that mattered. There are things you deserve to know, about this house, about this family, about what was taken from you before you were born. I will try to tell you everything. W. Blackwell, Duke of Blackwell. March 14th, 1871. Vivienne set the letter down on the desk. Her thumb was pressed to her lower lip. She pulled it away slowly, aware of the gesture only because he had named it. A man who had been dead for 150 years, writing about a habit so small she had never once noticed it in herself until this moment. The room felt different, not colder, not warmer, just altered, as if the air had shifted its weight slightly, rearranging itself around something that had just been named. She looked at the remaining 11 letters. Then she looked at the window. Outside, the iron gate at the foot of the drive was moving. Someone was opening it. She crossed to the window quickly, pressing close to the glass without touching it, looking down through the last of the evening light. A car, dark, expensive, moving slowly up the gravel path as if the driver already knew the way. It stopped in front of the house. The door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, dark coat, unhurried in his movements, the kind of unhurried that wasn't calm but controlled. He looked up at the house. Then, as if he knew exactly where she was standing, his gaze moved to the window. To her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she remembered the letter, Margaret's handwriting, the warning she had read in a parked car under the rain. Do not under any circumstances let Sebastian Blackwell inside that house. She took a step back from the window. He was already walking toward the front door. She didn't open the door. That was the first decision, small, deliberate, made in the space of about 4 seconds while his knock echoed through the hallway, and she stood completely still at the bottom of the stairs, letters pressed against her chest like something worth protecting. The knock came again, 3 times measured. Miss Holloway. His voice came through the wood clearly, low, unhurried, British in the way that old money is British, which is to say it carried the weight of things that were never said. "I know you're there. I saw you at the window." She said nothing. "I'm not going to pretend I don't have a reason to be here," he continued. "I'll be straightforward with you. I'd prefer to have this conversation through a door, but I can wait until you decide otherwise." A pause. "I've driven 3 hours. I'm willing to wait longer." She looked down at the letters in her hands. "Do not trust him." But Margaret had also not explained why. Vivienne made a second decision, marginally less small, considerably more complicated, and opened the door. He was taller in person than the angle from the window had suggested. Late 30s, she guessed, though something in the set of his expression made him seem older, not aged, but weathered, the way people look when they have spent a long time carrying something they don't talk about. His coat was dark wool. His jaw was unshaven by exactly the degree that suggested intention rather than neglect. His eyes, catching the last of the light from the hallway, were an uncommon shade, not quite grey, not quite green, the colour of river water on a cloudy day. He looked at her. She looked at him. Then his gaze dropped briefly, involuntarily, to the letters she was holding. Something changed in his face, not dramatically, a small tightening around the eyes, a stillness that was different from the stillness he'd carried before. "I found them," he said. "It wasn't a question. They were addressed to me. I know what they were addressed to." He looked back up at her face. "May I come in?" "My great-aunt specifically told me not to let you in." A pause. "Margaret told you that?" "In writing." He absorbed this. His expression didn't shift into offense or surprise. It shifted into something that looked almost like resignation, the expression of a man receiving news he had already half expected. He exhaled once, slow and quiet, and looked past her into the dark hallway. "She also told you not to trust the lawyer," he said. Vivienne went still. "How do you know that?" "Because I know Margaret." He brought his gaze back to hers. "And because she told me the same thing about myself." Something flickered in his expression, brief, difficult to read, gone before she could name it. "She wasn't wrong to warn you. I want to be clear about that, but I need you to understand that whatever she told you and whatever is in those letters is not the complete picture. Then tell me the rest of it." He looked at her for a long moment. "Not on a doorstep," he said. She let him in. She wasn't sure afterward whether it was courage or curiosity, or simply the particular kind of recklessness that comes from finding a box of impossible letters and realizing that the rules of normal life no longer quite applied. She showed him to the sitting room and did not offer tea, which felt like a small act of resistance she needed to make. He didn't seem to expect it. He sat, not in the largest chair, which she noticed, not sprawled or claiming space, but in the chair nearest the door as if he wanted to be aware of exits. She filed that away. He looked around the room slowly, taking in the portraits, the curtains, the layers of dust on surfaces that hadn't been touched in years. His gaze moved the way someone's gaze moves when they are looking at something familiar from a distance they haven't been allowed to close. "When were you last here?" she asked. "I haven't been." He looked at her. "Margaret stopped allowing Blackwells on the property 20 years ago." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Because of what I found." He told her some of it, not everything. She could feel the places where he stopped short, the pauses that were decisions rather than hesitations, but enough to reframe the evening she had already been having. His name was Sebastian Blackwell. He was a historian by training, a consultant by profession, and by inheritance the closest living male relative of the Blackwell title, a title that had died with the fourth Duke in 1874, 2 years after the last letter in the box was written. 3 years before his death, the Duke had changed his will, altering the line of succession and redirecting a significant portion of the Blackwell estate to a different branch of the family. "My branch," Sebastian said, without pride, without apology either, just fact. "But the original will—" "Was buried." He held her gaze. "Not lost, buried. There's a difference." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, hands loosely folded. "I found a reference to it 7 years ago, in a document that wasn't supposed to survive. I brought it to Margaret because she deserved to know." His jaw tightened, slight, visible, the only crack in the controlled surface. "She shut the door in my face and didn't speak to me again." Vivienne looked down at the letters in her lap. "She thought you were trying to take what you'd already taken." "Yes," He said it quietly. I know that's what she thought. And what were you actually trying to do? He looked at her for a long moment, a look that had weight to it, the kind of weight that comes from carrying a question for a long time before anyone bothers to ask it. Fix it, he said. The sitting room was very quiet. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and persistent, tapping against the tall windows. A log in the fireplace, she had found matches and attempted it on arrival, with moderate success, shifted and resettled, sending a brief scatter of sparks up the chimney. Vivienne turned the first letter over in her hands, the wax seal, the crest. He knew me, she said, not asking, just saying it aloud to hear how it sounded. Sebastian watched her. The Duke in 1871, he described. She stopped, pressed her thumb to her lip, remembered, pulled her hand down. He described things about me that he couldn't have known. I know. You've read them. No. Something shifted in his voice. But I know about them. Margaret told me they existed. She said... He paused. She said the Duke left something behind that proved everything. That told the whole story, for whoever was meant to hear it. His gaze moved to the letters. I didn't know who that was supposed to be until I saw your name on the brief from the estate solicitor. She looked up at him. You saw my name on the brief, and drove 3 hours. He held her gaze without apology. Yes. She should have been more unsettled by this. She registered the fact that she wasn't, and told herself it was because the evening had already exceeded its unsettling quota by a significant margin. She would deal with the rest of it later. What happened to him, she asked. The Duke. Sebastian was quiet for a moment. The official record says fever, he said carefully. 1874, he was 36. And unofficially? He looked at the fire. I have a theory, he said. I don't have proof. His voice was measured, the voice of someone who had learned to be careful with words in the specific way that people learn when they have been wrong before, and it cost them something. That's why I need the letters. The fire crackled. The rain continued. Vivienne looked at the man sitting across from her, the descendant of the people her great-aunt had spent her life protecting against, the man she had been warned not to trust, the man who had driven 3 hours in the rain because her name appeared on a legal document. She looked at the letters. She made a third decision. You don't get to read them tonight, she said, but you don't have to leave yet. Sebastian Blackwell looked at her for a long moment. The corner of his mouth moved, barely, not quite a smile. The suggestion of one, the way a door moves when someone passes it in the hallway without opening it. All right, he said. They stayed in the sitting room until nearly midnight, not reading the letters, not touching them, just talking. About the house, about the Duke, about the parts of the family history that Sebastian had spent years piecing together from documents that other people had decided were insignificant enough to survive. He was precise when he talked about history, clinical almost, dates and names and sequences of events laid out in clean, careful order. But occasionally something slipped through, a pause in the wrong place, a shift in his expression when a particular name came up. She noticed it and didn't comment on it, storing it the way you store things you don't know what to do with yet. At one point she asked him why it mattered to him, personally, not professionally. He looked at the fire for a long time before answering. Because someone in my family did something that couldn't be undone, he said, and I spent a long time believing that meant it didn't have to be acknowledged. A pause. I changed my mind. She didn't ask when. Something told her the answer to that question would take longer than tonight. At 10 past midnight, she showed him to the door. He put on his coat and stood on the threshold looking out at the rain, which had settled into something steady and quiet. The box was open when you found it, he said. It wasn't quite a question. The lock was rusted through. He nodded slowly. Someone tried to open it before you. She went still. When? I don't know. He turned to look at her. In the light from the hallway, his expression was difficult to read, serious but not alarmed. The expression of someone who has already calculated the thing you are just beginning to calculate. But the lawyer knew about the box. I don't know how much else he knows. She thought about the instruction in Margaret's letter. Do not trust the lawyer. Not a general warning, a specific one. You think he's already been here. I think you shouldn't stay here alone, Sebastian said, simply, without making it something it wasn't. She looked at him. I think, she said carefully, that my great-aunt would find this conversation deeply ironic. To not quite smile again, closer this time. Margaret had a complicated relationship with irony, he said. Then, lock the door, don't call the lawyer, and... He paused as if deciding whether to say the next part. Don't read the rest of the letters until I come back. She raised an eyebrow. I'll consider it, she said. He nodded once, accepting this for what it was, which was not a yes but was also not entirely a no, and walked out into the rain toward his car. She watched him go. Then she closed the door, locked it, and went back to the sitting room. She read 3 more letters before she let herself stop. She read them in order. That felt important, not skipping ahead, not hunting for the revelation she could already feel building in the center of the letters, like pressure before a storm. She read them the way the Duke had clearly intended them to be read, slowly, in sequence, one night at a time if that's what it took. The second letter was shorter than the first. Vivienne. I want to tell you about the house. Hartwell was built in 1743 by my great-grandfather, who was a man of considerable ambition and questionable taste in wallpaper. He chose this part of Wiltshire because of the river, the way it curves at the eastern edge of the property, visible from the upper floors, catching the light at certain hours in a way that he apparently found morally significant. I've always found rivers to be simply rivers, but perhaps that is a failure of imagination on my part. My childhood here was, by the standards available to me, unremarkable. I was the second son. I was expected to be ornamental and compliant, which I managed tolerably until I was about 15, and then stopped managing entirely. The study where I write these letters was my father's room. He did not like me in it. I've been using it exclusively for 7 years. I tell you this not because I think you need the history of a room, but because I want you to know the place the way I know it, from the inside, the way a house feels when you have lived inside it long enough that it stops being architecture and becomes something closer to a second skin. I want you to be able to walk through it and feel something familiar, even if you arrive when I am long gone. Even if familiar is the wrong word for it, and there is no word yet for what I actually mean. W. The third letter was longer, harder. Vivienne. I need to tell you about my cousin Edmund. I have avoided it until now because writing his name requires a particular kind of steadiness, and I have been working up to it. I am steadier tonight. The rain helps. Edmund is 7 years older than me, and has always understood, with the specific clarity of men who have decided what they want, that everything I am has value only as an obstacle to him. The title, the estate, the contents of the estate, which include, and I am not being metaphorical here, documents that certain people in my family would prefer to see burned. I found them 3 years ago, in a room I wasn't supposed to access, in a wing of this house that had been locked since before my father's time. Letters between my grandfather and a solicitor. Records of a transaction. I will not call it what it actually was, not yet, not in this letter, that transferred a significant portion of assets belonging to the Holloway line of the family. Assets that should, by right, by any honest reading of the original agreement, have passed through the female line. To you, Vivienne, to whoever you would become. Edmund knows I found them. He has been very careful since then to behave exactly as he always has, which is to say pleasantly, which is to say with the particular pleasantness of a man who has decided there is no urgency because he has already won. He believes I will do nothing. He is wrong. But I am not naive about what doing something will cost. W. She put the third letter down and sat with it for a while. Outside the window, the grounds of Hartwell were dark and quiet. The rain had softened to almost nothing. She could hear the river. Sebastian had mentioned it before he left. The river at the eastern edge, and she had filed it away. And now, here it was, in the Duke's letter, the river. The light it caught at certain hours, as if some details were simply fated to recur. She was thinking about Edmund. She was thinking about the lawyer, Gerald Finch, 50-something, careful eyes, the practiced stillness of a man who has made a profession of saying very little. She was thinking about the way he had paused before handing her Margaret's letter, the way he had said I couldn't say about her middle name, which was not the same as saying I don't know. She picked up her phone. Sebastian answered on the second ring. So you're reading them, he said. Not an accusation, not surprised. I told you I would consider it, she said. I considered it, I'm on the third one. A brief silence, and... Edmund, she said, that's the name. A longer silence. Yes, he said. Edmund Blackwell was the fourth Duke's cousin and primary heir under the altered will. His voice had gone careful again, the historian voice, precise and slightly removed. He inherited everything in 1874. His line continued. My line is his line. A pause. Vivienne. I know, she said. Another silence. I know, she said again, quieter. That's what I'm sitting with. She heard him exhale on the other end of the line. A long, controlled breath that carried something she couldn't entirely name. Not guilt, exactly. Something older than guilt. Something that had been carried long enough to have worn grooves. I should come back tomorrow, he said. Yes, she agreed. You should. She slept in the largest bedroom, which smelled of cedar and old lavender, and something she couldn't identify, something that wasn't unpleasant, something like turned pages, and woke at 6 in the morning to the sound of a door. Not the front door, somewhere inside the house. She was on her feet before she was fully conscious, the particular alertness of someone whose body has absorbed a warning before the mind has finished waking up. The room was grey with early light. The letters were on the bedside table where she had placed them. Still there. She moved to the door and opened it slowly. The hallway was empty. She stood and listened. Nothing, just the house. Its breathing, its settling, the ancient creak of wood responding to temperature changes. Old buildings made sounds. That was ordinary. She exhaled. Then she looked at the floor. There were wet footprints on the hallway floor, coming from the direction of the back staircase, stopping about 4 feet from her door, as if whoever had made them had paused there, and then turned around. She called Sebastian at 6:30. Someone was in the house. A silence that lasted approximately 1 second. Are you all right? Yes, they didn't come in the room, but they were in the hallway. There are footprints. She was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at the trail that led toward the back of the house, toward the servants' entrance. They came in through the back. She heard him moving, the sound of keys, a door. I'm already in the car, he said. You're 40 minutes away. 35. A pause. Don't go through the rest of the house alone. Stay where you can see the front door. If anything moves... I know how to call the police, Sebastian. I know you do. A beat. I'm still coming. She stood at the top of the stairs and looked at the wet footprints on the floor below and thought about the Duke's third letter, which she had left on the bedside table. He believes I will do nothing. He is wrong. The letters, she said. They came for the letters. I think so, Sebastian said. Were they... Still here, I had them upstairs. She heard the soft sound of him exhaling. Relief, contained and quick. Good. Sebastian, she kept her voice level. Who else knows about them? He was quiet for a moment. The lawyer, he said, and possibly whoever instructed the lawyer. Your family? A pause. My family, he said quietly, yes. The house was very still around her. The footprints on the floor were already beginning to dry at the edges. She looked at the portrait of the Duke at the end of the hallway. She hadn't noticed it was there last night, hadn't looked up that far. But here he was again, the same painted expression, the same particular quality of waiting. There are things you deserve to know. Hurry, she said. I'm already moving, Sebastian said. He arrived in 32 minutes. She had timed it without meaning to, standing at the window with her second cup of coffee going cold in her hands, watching the gate at the end of the drive. When his car came through, she let out a breath she hadn't registered holding. He came in quickly, not running, but not the controlled, unhurried pace of last night either. He stopped in the hallway and looked at the footprints, which she had not touched, not photographed yet, simply preserved. He crouched down and examined them without speaking for a long moment. Back entrance, he said. Through the kitchen. The lock is old, it probably wouldn't take much. He stood and looked at the trail, following it toward the study, then toward the stairs. They knew where to go. Or they were looking, she watched him. What would they be looking for specifically? He turned to face her. In the morning light he looked less composed than he had the night before, not disheveled, but thinner somehow, like a layer had been removed. The letters, if they don't know you have them. But there's something else. He paused. Margaret wrote to me once, years ago when we were still speaking, and she mentioned a document, not the letters, something separate. A legal instrument, a counter-will drawn up by the Duke before his death, witnessed and properly executed. If it exists, it supersedes the altered will. It would change everything. Vivienne was very still. Change everything, she repeated. The estate. The assets that were diverted in 1874. The title technically, though titles are more complicated. He held her gaze steadily. It would mean Edmund's inheritance was fraudulent, which means everything built on top of it. He stopped. Is built on fraud, she finished. Yes. She looked at him, really looked at him. The careful posture, the controlled expression, the river-colored eyes that gave away slightly more than he probably intended. She thought about what it meant to spend years trying to expose something that your own name was built on. You would lose things, she said. Yes. The consultancy, the reputation, Yeah, quietly. I know. And you're still here. He looked at her for a moment. Something moved behind his expression. Not dramatic, not performed, just present, the way real things are present when someone has stopped working to hide them. I told you last night, he said. I changed my mind about acknowledgement. She held his gaze for another moment, then looked away. Out the window, into the grounds. The morning was grey and still, the grass wet from last night's rain, the river visible at the far edge of the property, a line of silver between the tree line and the sky. The river at the eastern edge, visible from the upper floors, catching the light at certain hours. Help me search the house, she said. They searched for 3 hours. It was, in its way, an education. Not just in the house, in the man. She learned that he was systematic without being rigid, the kind of person who made a plan and then adapted it without ceremony when the plan revealed itself to be insufficient. She learned that he knew how to be quiet in a way that didn't feel like absence, comfortable in silence, not performing ease but actually having it. She learned that he had a habit of pressing one hand flat against the wall when he stopped to think, as if grounding himself through the touch. She didn't point it out. They found nothing in the study, the dining room or the first-floor bedrooms. The library gave them an hour, floor-to-ceiling shelves, books that hadn't been moved in decades, the particular stillness of a room that has been waiting for someone to need it. Sebastian moved through the shelves methodically, while Vivienne went through the desk, which was older than the rest of the furniture, probably the Duke's own. The third drawer on the left was stuck. Not locked, stuck, swollen with age, the wood expanded in its frame. She pulled at it twice, then stopped, looked at it, looked at the frame, and pushed inward before pulling out. The drawer moved. Inside, not documents. A small notebook, leather-covered, pages filled in the same hand as the letters, but more compressed, less formal. Notes rather than correspondence. And tucked into the back cover, folded twice and soft with age. A document. She held it carefully. It was dense with legal language, old-fashioned phrasing, antiquated terms of conveyance, the formal structure of a Victorian legal instrument. Her Latin was not good enough for some of the phrases, but the signature at the bottom she could read clearly. William Arthur Blackwell, 4th Duke of Blackwell. And below that, 2 witness signatures dated January 1874, 6 months before his death. Her hands were very steady. She noticed this as if from a slight distance. Sebastian! He was at the other end of the library. He crossed to her, looked at what she was holding and went completely still. For a long moment, neither of them moved or spoke. That's it, he said quietly. Yes. He looked at it for another moment, then looked at her. Something in his expression had shifted, not relief, not triumph. Something rawer than either, the expression of someone standing at the end of something they started without knowing how it would feel when they got there. It's real, she said. It looks real, he exhaled slowly. We'd need to verify. It's real. She didn't know why she was so certain. She just was. The same way she was certain about the letters, about her name carved on the lid of the box, about the habit she'd had her whole life of pressing her thumb to her lip when she was thinking. Certain in the way you're certain about things that have always been true, that were waiting for you to arrive at the right moment to see them. She looked at the document in her hands. The Duke had known when he wrote this that he might not survive to use it. He had made provisions anyway. He had written 12 letters to a woman he would never meet and hidden a legal instrument in a drawer that would take 150 years and the right sequence of events to find. He had believed against all evidence and probability that eventually the right person would come. She thought about the portrait in the hallway, the quality of waiting in his painted expression. I find that I cannot stop writing to you. He died for this, she said. Sebastian was quiet for a moment. I think so, he said. Yes. She folded the document carefully and held it. Outside, something changed. The grey morning sky shifted, thinned, and for a moment the sun came through, pale and winter-thin, falling through the tall library windows and crossing the floor in a long diagonal line. It reached the spine of the nearest shelf, lit the old gilded letters there briefly, then moved on. Vivienne looked at it until it passed. Then she looked at Sebastian. "We need to talk about what comes next," she said. He nodded. "We do," he said. He was standing close, not because the room required it, but because somewhere in the last 3 hours the careful distance of strangers had been quietly replaced with something that didn't have a name yet, the particular proximity of people who have stood inside the same weight long enough to stop measuring the space between them. She was aware of it. She chose not to move away. "Whoever came in last night will come back," she said. "Yes. And the lawyer knows more than he's said." "Yes. So we have a narrow window." "Yes." His voice was level, but his eyes weren't quite. Something there that matched the rawness from before, slightly more present now than it had been 3 hours ago. "Are you frightened?" She considered the question honestly. "No," she said. "I should be, but no." He looked at her for a moment. "Neither am I," he said, quietly, with the slight quality of surprise in it, the way you might note an unexpected weather change, something that goes against the forecast. She looked down at the document in her hands, this piece of a dead man's faith in the future, and then back up at Sebastian Blackwell, who had driven 3 hours in the rain for a name on a document, who was trying to undo what his own family had done, who pressed his hand flat against the wall when he was thinking, and whose eyes were the color of river water on a cloudy day. She thought about the Duke. She thought about all the things he had started patiently in the dark, without knowing who would finish them. "All right," she said, "let's finish it." Gerald Finch had a second phone. She didn't know this yet when they drove into the city that afternoon. Sebastian behind the wheel, the document sealed in an envelope inside her bag, the notebook from the library in her coat pocket, because she hadn't wanted to leave it behind. She knew it 20 minutes after they arrived at the records office, when Sebastian looked up from the file he was reviewing and said, without particular inflection, "Gerald Finch is not his original name." She looked at him. "His original name," Sebastian said, setting the file flat on the table between them, "was Gerald Edmund Blackwell Finch. He changed it in 1998. He's Edmund's great-great-grandson." The records office was quiet around them. Low ceilings, fluorescent light, the particular dusty warmth of rooms that are maintained rather than inhabited. A clerk was moving papers at the far desk. Nobody was listening. Vivienne looked at the file. Gerald Finch, born 1971, solicitor. Changed name by deed poll, March 1998. Previous name, Gerald Edmund Blackwell Finch. "He was assigned to Margaret's estate," she said. "He was assigned to Margaret's estate." She knew. "She knew," Sebastian paused, "and she sent you to him anyway." Vivienne looked up. "Why would she—" "Because she wanted you to find the box first." He held her gaze. "She knew Finch would move eventually. She calculated that if she sent you directly, if he had to watch you walk in and take possession, it would slow him down. He'd have to wait until you were alone at the property before he could do anything. And she—" He stopped. "She thought I'd have the letters and be gone before he got there," Vivienne finished. "Yes, except you stayed." She sat with that for a moment. Margaret, in her 80s, dying, orchestrating this. The letter with the instructions, the middle name, the warning about Sebastian that she must have known Vivienne would reason her way past eventually. Doing what she had always done, which was to protect the thing the Duke had started, against whatever came for it, for as long as she was capable of anything at all. "She was extraordinary," Vivienne said quietly. Sebastian looked at the file. "Yes," he said, "she was." They brought the document to a specialist, a colleague of Sebastian's, a woman named Dr. Harriet Obi, who taught legal history at UCL and had, apparently, an unmatched ability to verify Victorian instruments quickly and without fuss. She examined the document in her office for 40 minutes, while Vivienne and Sebastian sat in the corridor outside, not quite talking, not quite not talking. A conversation that moved in short exchanges and longer silences, comfortable in a way that felt earned rather than assumed. At one point he asked her what she had done before this week. "Freelance translation," she said. "French and Latin mostly." He looked at her. "Latin," he repeated. "Yes. That's useful." "I know." She held his gaze for a moment. "I could have read the document myself." The not quite smile. More defined than it had been last night, wider as if it was getting less work to suppress it. I could have mentioned the Latin phrases. You could have. I didn't know you spoke it. You didn't ask. A pause. I'll ask more, he said. She looked at the wall, looked back at him. Something settled between them. Not resolved, not named, just settled. The way things settle when two people decide, without discussing it, to move in the same direction. Dr. Obi's door opened. She looked at them both over her glasses, with the expression of a woman who has confirmed something important and is choosing her words carefully. It's real, she said. It's going to take formal authentication, 3 to 6 months through the proper channels, given its age and the nature of the legal question. But preliminary indicators are consistent with an authentic Victorian instrument. The paper, the ink degradation, the handwriting characteristics, the seal. She paused. If someone challenges this, they will lose. Vivienne looked at Sebastian. He was looking at the document, now back in the envelope, back in Vivienne's hands, with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not the controlled, careful mask, not the rawness from the library. Something quieter, something that looked like the face people make when a weight they have been carrying so long they forgot it was there finally. Slowly begins to lift. Thank you, Harriet, he said. It was evening by the time they left. They stood on the pavement outside the building, and the city moved around them. The ordinary noise of an ordinary evening, people going home, the particular amber quality of London streetlights in early spring. It felt strange. Vivienne was aware of how strange it felt, after the past 48 hours, to be standing somewhere ordinary. What do you do now? She asked. Sebastian looked out at the street. File a challenge. The formal authentication process will take months, but the documentation is strong enough to compel certain interim measures. Finch loses his ability to act as executor immediately. Conflict of interest once his name change and family connection are disclosed. He paused. And I'll need to contact the rest of my family. She looked at him. How will that go? Badly. He said it without self-pity, just fact. Some of them already know, some of them don't. None of them will be pleased. He paused. It doesn't change what needs to happen. She nodded slowly. The streetlight above them was doing what the sun had done through the library windows earlier, falling at an angle, catching the edges of things, and making them briefly, unexpectedly clear. The notebook, she said. What about it? She reached into her coat pocket, took it out, held it for a moment. I haven't read all of it, she said, but there's something in the back, the last few pages. She had looked at it in the car while Sebastian drove and found something she hadn't told him about yet. He wrote about the end, the Duke, about what he expected to happen. Sebastian looked at the notebook. She opened it to the back pages and held it where he could read. I have made what provisions I can. I do not know if they will hold. Documents can be destroyed, witnesses can be silenced, and Edmund has always been patient in ways that I am not. But I have learned, in these years of writing letters to a future I cannot see, that intention matters, that putting words into the world has weight even when no one is there to hear them yet. I'm not afraid. I want that on record wherever this ends up. I was not afraid. I was angry sometimes. I was lonely often. But I was not afraid. Whatever happens next will happen to someone else, someone who has not been born yet, who will find what I have left, who will carry forward what I could not. I hope she is not too tired when she arrives. I hope she has someone with her. W. She closed the notebook. Sebastian was looking at the page where she had closed it. His expression was very still. He hoped you had someone with you, he said quietly. She looked at him. The street was ordinary around them. The light was catching the edges of things the way it does. I do, she said. He looked at her. The river-colored eyes, the expression that had been getting less work to suppress all day, that was now not suppressed at all, just present, just visible. The way his face looked when he had stopped performing steadiness and was simply feeling it. He didn't say anything. He didn't move closer, didn't reach out, just held her gaze in the amber light on an ordinary street at the end of a day that had changed several irreversible things. It was enough. It was exactly enough. 6 months later, the authentication came through. She was at Hartwell when Sebastian called her with the news. She had been staying there on and off since autumn, the house slowly becoming less of an archive and more of a place, the cedar smell less strange, the portraits less unfamiliar. She had learned the names of most of the people in them. She had learned the river, which behaved exactly as the Duke had described, catching the light at certain hours with a quality that she was no longer inclined to dismiss as merely geographic. She was in the study when her phone rang, standing near the window, not quite waiting, but not entirely not waiting either. "It's final," Sebastian said. She sat down slowly in the chair behind the desk, the Duke's desk which she had started to think of simply as the desk, and looked out the window at the grounds and the silver line of the river at the edge of the trees. "Final," she repeated. "The instrument is authenticated. The challenge is filed. Finch has been removed as executor. The Law Society is dealing with that separately." A pause. "The family has contested, as expected, but the legal counsel says the counter will is airtight. It will take another few months through the formal process, but the outcome is—" He stopped. She heard him exhale slowly. "It's done, Vivienne. It's done." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the light was doing the river thing, that particular quality, golden still, that she had now seen in every season, and which was, she had concluded, simply true. Not significant in the way the Duke had made it seem significant, just real, which turned out to be better. "Where are you?" she asked. "Car park outside the records office. I've been sitting here for about 20 minutes. Are you all right?" A pause. "Yes." Then quieter. "I think so. It's strange to be on the other side of it." "I know," she said. "The house is yours," he said, formally. "Everything Margaret held in trust, everything the original will designated, it's all going through proper transfer." A pause. "Are you going to keep it?" She looked around the study. The Duke's desk, the bookshelves, the place where the floorboard had given way under her heel and changed everything. "Yes," she said. "Good." She finished reading the letters that evening, all 12 of them in order, sitting in the study with the fire going and the last of the autumn light fading outside the window. She had read most of them by now, pieces, fragments over the past 6 months, but she had been saving the last 2, which had felt every time she reached for them, like something she needed to be ready for. The 11th letter was dated October 1873, 14 months before his death. Vivienne. "I want to tell you something. I have not said clearly enough in the other letters. I am not writing to you because I expect rescue. I am not sending these letters into the future because I believe someone will come and fix what I cannot fix. I am writing because I need you to know that what happened here was known. That someone saw it, named it, refused to call it anything other than what it was. That is all I can do from here, but it is not nothing. I hope the world you live in is kinder than this one. I hope there are people in it who do the hard thing without requiring it to be easy. I hope you have found, somewhere, the particular kind of company that doesn't ask you to be smaller than you are. I hope you are not lonely. W." She had to put the letter down for a moment. She pressed her thumb to her lip. She left it there this time. The 12th letter was the shortest. Vivienne. "I have said everything I have to say. The documents are where they need to be. The letters are where they need to be. You presumably are where you need to be. I hope it was worth the wait." W. January 14th, 1874. She folded the last letter carefully and set it with the others. The fire had burned low. Outside, the first stars were visible over the grounds, the sky very clear, the river catching what light remained, a faint silver line in the dark. She heard the front gate. She heard a few minutes later the sound of a key in the lock, the new lock fitted last month for which she had given Sebastian a copy because it had seemed like the obvious thing to do, and neither of them had discussed it in terms more complicated than that. She heard the door. She heard his footsteps on the floor of the hallway, familiar now, crossing toward the light. He appeared in the doorway of the study, coat still on. Something in his face that she could read clearly now. The months had made his expressions legible to her in a way that felt like a language she had been quietly learning without deciding to. He looked at the letters arranged on the desk. He looked at her. "You read the last ones," he said. "Yes." He came into the room, sat in the chair across from the desk, the same chair he had sat in on the first night, the one near the door, the one he no longer chose because of exits. He shrugged off his coat and looked at the fire for a moment. "How was it?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. "He was at peace," she said. "By the end. I don't think he was before. The middle letters are. There's a lot of anger in them, a lot of grief. But the last one, She paused. He'd done what he could do. He let the rest of it go. Sebastian nodded slowly. They were quiet for a moment. Outside, the clear night was the kind that felt deliberate, the stars too bright, the air too still, as if the world had decided to hold its breath for a moment and let things be what they were. Sebastian was looking at the fire. She was looking at him. 6 months had done something to the space between them. Not collapsed it, not rushed it, but changed its quality, the way a room changes when someone has been living in it long enough to leave traces. She knew the way he took his coffee. She knew that he went quiet when he was working through something difficult, and that the quiet was not absence but concentration. She knew that he had called her from the car park and sat there for 20 minutes before reaching for his phone, and that this was the kind of detail she had filed away without deciding to, the way you file away things that matter before you know they matter. She knew that he was here. On a Tuesday night, at the end of a long 6 months, with the authentication done and the legal machinery set in motion, and all the things that had been wrong for 150 years finally, slowly, beginning to be made right, he was here, in the chair across from her, looking at the fire. She picked up the 12th letter. "I want to read you something," she said. He looked at her. She read it aloud. All 12 lines, the short, careful words, the particular voice she had come to know across 11 other letters, now at its quietest. "I have said everything I have to say. The documents are where they need to be. The letters are where they need to be. You presumably are where you need to be." She folded it. "I hope it was worth the wait." The fire made a small sound, a log settling, a brief bright scatter of light. Sebastian was looking at her with the expression she had first seen in the library, the one that appeared when he stopped performing steadiness and was simply feeling it. It was fully present now, nothing held back, the river-colored eyes catching the firelight. "He wrote that in January 1874, she said. "He was dead by August." "Yes." "He never knew if it worked." "No." She set the letter down carefully with the others. "But he still wrote it," she said. "He still did every single thing that needed to be done, without knowing if any of it would hold, without knowing who would come or when or whether they would be in time." She looked at Sebastian. "He just decided to believe it would matter, and then acted accordingly." Sebastian was quiet for a moment. "That takes a particular kind of courage," he said. "Or stubbornness." The corner of his mouth moved. "Both, probably." "Both," she agreed. She made tea. It had become a thing, not a ritual exactly, more like a habit that had arrived gradually, the kind that doesn't announce itself but is simply one day just present. She moved through the kitchen, and he sat at the table near the window, and they talked while the kettle heated. The way they talked now, easily, without effort, conversation that moved between practical and personal without marking the transition. He told her about the formal proceedings, the timeline, the family members who had already begun adjusting their positions, not gracefully, but pragmatically, which he had expected. She told him about the letters, about what she had understood, finishing them, about the Duke's state of mind in the final years, not defeated but resolved, the anger burned down to something cleaner and more durable. He trusted Margaret, she said. That's the thing. He had no way of knowing she would hold it for 50 years, that she would keep the box, keep the secret, redirect the estate, find a way to get it to the right person. She poured the tea, set his cup in front of him. He just believed she would, and she did. Sebastian wrapped his hands around the cup. He trusted someone who deserved it, he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the steam rising from the cup, not avoiding her gaze, just looking at something else for a moment, the way people do when they are saying something true and don't want to make it bigger than it is. "Sebastian." He looked up. "What you did," she said. "Coming here the 7 years before that, going to Margaret even when she shut the door, carrying this when you didn't have to." She stopped, started again. He would have... She stopped again. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "I know," she held his gaze. "I want to." He was still. The firelight from the hallway reached the kitchen doorway and stopped there, leaving them in the softer light of the overhead lamp, which was warmer and less dramatic and exactly right for this kind of moment. "He would have trusted you," she said. "The Duke. If he had known you existed, if he could have seen what you did with what he left behind." She paused. "He would have trusted you completely." Something moved through Sebastian's expression. Slow, deep, the way movement happens in water rather than air. Not dramatic, not performed, just real. He set down his cup. He reached across the table, unhurried, deliberate, and put his hand over hers where it rested on the table. His palm was warm, his grip was light, the kind of grip that holds without weighing. He didn't say anything. She didn't either. The kitchen was warm. The night was clear outside the window. Somewhere below the grounds, the river ran quietly through the dark, catching nothing now, just moving, just continuing in the way it had always continued, indifferent to the people on the banks and completely faithful to its course. Later, she stood at the window of the study. She had meant to go upstairs. She had stopped, as she often did, at the Duke's portrait at the end of the hallway, and then continued to the study and stood at the window, looking out at the grounds. Sebastian came and stood beside her. They stood in the dark room with the night outside, and the faint reflection of themselves in the old glass. Her, him, the space between them that was not empty now, had not been empty for some time, was in fact so fully inhabited that she wasn't sure when it had happened. "I've been thinking about the last letter," she said. "Which part?" "You, presumably, are where you need to be." She paused. "He wrote it to me, but he didn't know me. He only knew that whoever found the box would be here, in this house, holding this piece of paper, at whatever point in the future things had moved far enough along." Sebastian was quiet. "He couldn't have known it would be you," he said. "No." She looked out at the dark grounds. "But it was." A pause. "And are you?" he asked. "Where you need to be?" She thought about translation work done in a quiet flat. Mornings that had resembled each other so closely, they had stopped feeling like separate days. She thought about the box in the floorboard. The first letter. Her own name on the lid, in a dead man's carving. She thought about the man standing beside her, who had pressed his hand flat against a library wall and driven 3 hours in the rain and sat in a car park for 20 minutes before calling her with news that had changed both their lives. Who had tried to undo what his family had done, not because it was easy or safe or without cost, but simply because it was the right thing, and he had decided, at some point, that she suspected he could not precisely locate, that being the kind of person who did right things mattered more than protecting the inheritance built on a wrong one. She looked at their reflection in the old glass. "Yes," she said. He turned his head slightly, not quite toward her, not quite away. The very edge of his expression visible in profile, the quality she could read clearly now that had been getting less suppressed across 6 months of proximity until it had simply become his face. Present, open, unhurried. His shoulder was warm against hers. "Good," he said, quietly, with the slight quality of someone saying a thing they have been holding carefully for a long time and have now finally set down. She wrote a letter that night. She had been thinking about it for weeks, since she read the Duke's 10th letter, in which he had described the act of writing itself as a form of faith, putting words into the future without knowing who would receive them or what they would mean when they arrived. She had thought about it again reading his final note. I hope it was worth the wait. She sat at his desk, used the desk lamp, took paper from the drawer, not his ordinary modern paper, but the desk felt right. She wrote, "To whoever finds this, I don't know you. I don't know when you are or what the world looks like from where you're sitting or what brought you to this house and this desk in this particular moment. But I know this house. I know what it holds, not just in the walls and the floorboards and the letters in the box, but in the fact of itself, the fact that it survived, that the things hidden inside it survived, that the people who kept it going, who held the thread even when they couldn't see the other end, held on anyway. Someone once wrote to me across 150 years, certain that intention matters, even when you can't see the outcome. He was right. So here is my intention for you, whoever you are. You are not too late. Whatever you came here looking for, whatever needs to be found, acknowledged, made right, it is still possible. Start with what you have. Trust someone who deserves it. Don't be afraid to take up the space that was always yours. It is worth the wait. She folded the letter, looked at it for a moment, opened the bottom left drawer, the one that had been stuck, the one she had opened by pushing inward before pulling out, and placed it inside. She left the drawer slightly open. She turned off the desk lamp. The study was dark except for the thin silver light coming through the window, the moon now low and full, the river at the edge of the grounds catching it the way it caught everything, faithfully, without drama. She looked at the Duke's portrait one last time. The expression on his painted face had not changed in 150 years, would not change. The quality of waiting, permanent in oil and canvas, fixed at 1871 forever. But she understood it differently now. He wasn't waiting for rescue. He was waiting to see if the thing he had built in the dark, with no guarantee, would hold. She smiled at him. Small, quiet, the kind of smile that doesn't need an audience. It held, she thought. It held. She walked out of the study and up the stairs. At the landing, she paused. Down the hall, the light under Sebastian's door was still on. She could see it from here. A thin line of amber beneath the wood, warm and steady. She looked at it for a moment. Then she continued to her room. Some things didn't need to be rushed. The light stayed on for a while longer. Then quietly it went out. Some loves are not destroyed by time. They are simply held by it, until the right hands arrive. Did this story stay with you? Subscribe so you never miss a new chapter, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We read every single one.
I found your name in a house that shouldn't breathe. Dust on the walls, but it was calling me. 1,000 echoes trapped in broken light. Then I read your words, and you were still alive. You shouldn't know me, you couldn't see, but every line you wrote was reaching out for me. You wrote my name across time, like you knew I'd find the truth. Now I'm running through shadows with nothing left to lose. And I don't know if it's fate or a ghost I can't outrun, but your voice in the silence feels stronger than anyone. There's someone watching every step I take. A door left open, a move I didn't make. The night keeps secrets buried in the walls, but I feel your hand every time I fall. This isn't over, it just began. to